Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Intelligent Pod. I'm your host, Sophie Lane, and as always, I'm thrilled to have you with me as we dive into the fascinating, sometimes perplexing world of human curiosity and knowledge. Today, we're going to peel back the curtain on a topic that's as intriguing as it is unsettling: the history of scientific hoaxes and frauds. Now, I know, when we think of science, we like to imagine a world of careful measurement, peer review, and noble pursuit of truth. And that's true for the most part. But what happens when ambition, ego, or even just a mischievous sense of fun gets in the way? What happens when scientists, or those posing as scientists, bend or outright break the rules? That's our journey today. We'll explore the most notorious scientific hoaxes and frauds, look at why they happened, how they were uncovered, and what they teach us about trust, skepticism, and the very nature of discovery. And don't worry, I'll make sure this isn't just a history lesson. Stick around for some practical takeaways about critical thinking, spotting misinformation, and protecting yourself in this age of information overload. First, let's set the stage. Scientific fraud isn't a modern phenomenon. It's been around as long as science itself. In fact, the very roots of the scientific method, the careful, methodical process of observation, hypothesis, experiment, and peer review, grew out of a need to guard against human error and deception. But before we dive into the details, let's start with a question. Why would someone fake science in the first place? There are lots of reasons. Sometimes it's fame. Everyone wants to be the person who made the big discovery. Sometimes it's fortune. There's money in new patents, miracle cures, or government grants. Sometimes it's ideology, trying to prove a cherished belief, even if the evidence doesn't cooperate. And sometimes it's just for fun, to see if you can fool the experts. Let's get into some of the most famous and infamous cases. One of the oldest documented scientific hoaxes goes all the way back to the early 18th century with the so-called Mechanical Turk. This was a chess-playing machine unveiled in 1770 by Wolfgang von Kempelen. The Mechanical Turk dazzled audiences across Europe, defeating human opponents, including, famously, Napoleon Bonaparte. For decades, people debated, was this the birth of artificial intelligence? Had humans created a machine that could think? Well, the answer was a resounding no. The Mechanical Turk was actually a clever illusion with a human chess master hidden inside, manipulating the pieces. The hoax was only discovered decades later. But it raises an interesting point about our willingness to believe in technological miracles, and how easily our desire for progress can blind us to skepticism. Fast forward to the late 19th century, and we find another infamous case, the Piltdown Man. In 1912, in a gravel pit in Sussex, England, amateur archaeologist Charles Dawson claimed to have found the fossilized remains of a previously unknown early human. The Piltdown Man was hailed as the missing link between apes and humans, a huge headline and a point of national pride for British science. But there was a problem. The fossil was, in fact, a clever forgery, a human skull combined with the jaw of an orangutan, stained and filed to match. For more than 40 years, the Piltdown Man was accepted as genuine, distorting our understanding of human evolution. It wasn't until 1953, when advances in dating and chemical analysis revealed the fraud. Let's pause here for a moment. The Piltdown hoax is a perfect example of how cultural bias can shape science. British scientists at the time were eager to find evidence of early humans in their own backyard, rather than admit that the earliest fossils came from Africa or Asia. This desire for national prestige may have made them less critical, less willing to question the evidence. And this isn't just a quirky story from history. The lessons of Piltdown still resonate. It reminds us that science isn't done in a vacuum. It's shaped by the people, cultures, and politics of its time. And it reminds us of the importance of skepticism, peer review, and independent verification. Now, let's look at a more modern and in many ways more troubling example, the case of Andrew Wakefield and the MMR vaccine hoax. In 1998, British doctor Andrew Wakefield published a paper in The Lancet linking the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine to autism. The results were sensational and quickly spread through the media, but there was a problem. The study was deeply flawed, and Wakefield had undisclosed financial conflicts of interest. Subsequent investigations revealed that he had manipulated data and violated ethical guidelines. The fallout was catastrophic. Vaccination rates plummeted, and outbreaks of measles, a disease previously under control, began to reappear. The Lancet fully retracted the paper in 2010, and Wakefield lost his medical license. But the damage was done. The anti-vaccine movement, fueled in part by this fraudulent study, continues to sow doubt and confusion to this day. Let's look at this from a psychological perspective. Why do scientific hoaxes and frauds succeed, even when the evidence is shaky or the claims are extraordinary? Part of the answer is confirmation bias, the tendency to believe things that fit our pre-existing beliefs, and to ignore or discount evidence that doesn't. We want to believe in easy cures, in simple explanations, in our own cleverness or superiority. Sometimes, the more sensational the claim, the more appealing it is. There's also what psychologists call authority bias. When someone in a position of authority, say a respected scientist or a doctor, makes a claim, we're more likely to accept it without question. This is why peer review and transparency are so important in science. Let's not forget the role of the media either. Sensational stories sell newspapers, or, in the digital age, drive clicks and shares. Sometimes journalists and editors don't have the expertise to spot questionable science, or they're under pressure to publish first and ask questions later. But I don't want to paint too bleak a picture. Most scientists are honest, and the scientific community has, over time, developed powerful tools to detect and correct fraud. Peer review, replication, data transparency, and open discussion are all designed to catch errors, whether accidental or intentional. Let's talk about some of the safeguards in more detail. One interesting academic study comes to mind. In 2012, a team led by Daniele Sanelli at the University of Edinburgh analyzed retractions in scientific literature and found that, while outright fraud is rare, accounting for less than 1% of all published papers, it's more common in high-impact journals, where the pressure to publish big, newsworthy findings is greatest. This suggests that the very structure of academic competition can sometimes incentivize bad behavior. Finelli's study also highlights another important point. Science is self-correcting, but not always quickly. It can take years or even decades to uncover a fraud, especially if it's well hidden or if the person behind it is highly respected. Now, I promised you a real-life anecdote, and this is one of my favorites. Maybe because it's just so delightfully weird. In the 1980s, the American physicist Alan Sokal decided to test the rigor of academic publishing in the humanities. He submitted a deliberately nonsensical paper, transgressing the boundaries towards a transformative hermeneutics of quantum gravity, to a cultural studies journal. To his surprise, the paper was accepted and published, sparking a huge debate about standards of evidence and expertise, not just in science but across academia. So, what can we learn from all this? And, more importantly, how can you, as a curious and intelligent listener, protect yourself from scientific frauds and hoaxes, especially in today's world of viral misinformation and fake news? Here are a few actionable tips. Number 1, always check the source. Is the claim coming from a reputable journal, university, or scientist? Or is it making its way around Facebook with no real attribution? Number 2, look for consensus. One study, especially if it's sensational, doesn't prove anything. Reliable scientific knowledge comes from repeated experiments and a body of evidence, not a single splashy headline. Number 3, be skeptical of extraordinary claims. As the saying goes, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If something sounds too good or too alarming to be true, it probably deserves a closer look. Number 4, beware of conflicts of interest. Is there financial, political, or personal gain involved? Sometimes, following the money can reveal hidden motives. Number 5, remember that science is a process, not a finished product. Mistakes happen. The important thing is how scientists respond. Do they correct errors, share data, and invite others to replicate their work? All right, let's recap what we've covered today. Scientific hoaxes and frauds have been with us for centuries, from the trickery of the Mechanical Turk to the tragic consequences of the anti-vaccine movement. They succeed because of human biases, our desire to believe, our trust in authority, and our hunger for sensational stories. But science, at its best, is a self-correcting enterprise built on skepticism, transparency, and the willingness to question even our most cherished beliefs. As you go about your day, I encourage you to keep that spirit of curiosity and skepticism alive. Celebrate the wonders of science, but don't be afraid to ask tough questions. Remember, being intelligently skeptical isn't about being cynical. It's about being open-minded, thoughtful, and responsible. Thank you so much for joining me today on Intelligent Pod. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps more curious minds find the show. For show notes, resources, and more episodes, visit intelligentpod.com. And if you have thoughts, questions, or stories of scientific mysteries and discoveries, I'd love to hear from you. Email me anytime at sophie@intelligentpod.com. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and stay curious. This is Sophie Lane, signing off from Intelligent Pod.